I'm going to ask a weird question. Who's really in charge of our government right now? The answer may surprise you. Obviously, we the people are supposed to be through our elected officials. But are they carrying out the will of the people, or are they caught up in their own political game? I'm about to reveal the ultimate backstory about how the Trump administration was stifled in an attempt to prevent Donald Trump from fully becoming President of the United States. Let's take a look at the coup on paper as it was ordered May 6, 2016 by none other than former President of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama. Then let's look at how this executive order has shaped current events leading up to the 2020 election.
Intelligence officials warned lawmakers that Russia is trying to intervene in the 2020 election to help President Trump get reelected.
These sneaky Democrats.
The intelligence community is warning that Russia is once again planning to interfere in a U.S. election. The president is infuriated, but not by what Russia is doing. Instead, he is angry that intelligence officials shared that information with Democrats in Congress. The president called in then acting director of national intelligence Joseph Maguire, replaced by ambassador to Germany Rick Grenell, a staunch Trump loyalist. ABC News has confirmed the additional departures of 2 more top intelligence officials.
I've discussed in previous reports how Eisenhower anticipated the potential for
the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists,
thereby setting up a secret back channel to bypass the intelligence community as a way to keep both the agencies and the military in check through the office of the president to avoid situations just like the one President Trump finds himself in today. However, if a state of emergency can be invoked, the emergency protocols under the continuity of government go into effect, thereby short-circuiting constitutional government.
We are at DEFCON 1. DEFCON 1.
I have an obligation as the president, and my administration has an obligation to the American people to put measures in place that should somebody be successful in an attack in Washington, D.C., there's an ongoing government.
After President Bush was elected, we were briefed by the Clinton administration on many national security issues during the transition. On an operational level, therefore, we decided immediately to continue to pursue the Clinton administration's covert action authorities.
National security and double government. Now, I'm sure the first thing that occurs to anybody is, I don't even like the government we have. Why do I have to have a double government?
There are 2 mechanisms of control in the U.S. The Madisonian public institutions of the Congress, presidency, and the courts, which maintain the necessary public illusion that they are in charge and in control of policy, while a secretive Trumanite network of unelected, unaccountable national security bureaucrats actually make and set policy that the Madisonians appear to implement as their own.
I was a bit puzzled and troubled why national security policy remained almost unchanged from the Bush administration to the Obama administration. So many elements of that policy are virtually identical, from drone strikes, covert operations,
Guantanamo Bay,
Guantanamo, NSA surveillance.
It's a great point.
You go right down the list. It's an amazing continuity.
By maintaining a continuous series of emergencies or exemption clauses, one can potentially invoke a force majeure to keep from having to transfer power.
Force majeure clause is sometimes known as an act of God clause. So it's an event that occurred outside the control of the parties, contractual obligations to deal with the unexpected. The biggest example of force majeure clause in our lifetimes is 9/11.
What happened at 9/11 is we didn't have a strategy, we didn't have bipartisan agreement, we didn't have American understanding of it, and we had instead a policy coup. We take the continuity of government issue very seriously.
W. Bush also invoked emergency powers in the wake of the September 11th attacks, signing off on extensive wiretapping and enhanced interrogation methods.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste.
Never waste a good crisis.
And the best way to think about emergencies in this way is shortcuts to the rules to get around ordinary checks and balances.
And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
What the deep state, shadow government, national security bureaucrats, or Trumanites believe is that they know better. Therefore, they should have their hands on the controls and not the general public. Sounds kind of like slavery. We think we're in control, but really it's the shadow government. Hence why the deep state has its own checks and balances to keep the public institutions from controlling public and foreign policy. May 6, 2016, President Obama wrote an executive order stipulating emergency procedures during the transfer of executive power, ordering who would assist and coordinate the transition of power for each of the key national security agencies. And voila, the Trump presidency is dead on arrival. Or so they planned.
Trump will not be president.
Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. Take it to the bank.
Okay.
I guarantee it.
All right.
Just look at this executive order. By the authority vested in me as president,
Lord and Savior Barack Obama.
To facilitate the presidential transition, including assisting and supporting the transition efforts of the transition teams of eligible candidates, there is established a White House Transition Coordinating Council, where the transition representative for each eligible candidate shall serve in an advisory capacity, including any other executive branch official the president,
Lord and Savior Barack Obama,
determines appropriate. And the liberals try to act like Trump thinks he's a king. Obama thought he was a king. Hey, you're new at this, so let me help you.
I have declared Philip my High Counselor.
Is he qualified? I am skilled in the arts of war and military tactics, sir.
And tell me, what advice would you offer on the present situation?
See, Trump's people weren't qualified. Not that they were sabotaged or anything.
An employee at the FBI who altered a document that was used in the preparation for one of the FISA warrants, one of the warrants, surveillance warrants, and that person admitted to making that change.
The Department of Justice is withholding a lot of information, as is Mr. Clapper, Mr. Brennan, and all of the people who participated in the complete setup of General Michael Flynn.
So we couldn't transfer the national security apparatus to them.
He now has a cabinet with appointees, some of whom are very good. The fact that he has lots of adults around him in a room that know policy, and he has no policy background whatsoever, I would want him to engage and leverage and devolve power,
thereby creating perpetual emergencies that need investigations to maintain that the Trump administration is unable to discharge the duties of the executive branch. Therefore, the top secret and classified material that implicates the Obama administration in serious crimes, abuses of office, etc., can be kept in the dark.
U.S. spies are withholding sensitive information from the president. In your story, you report that the mistrust stems from the contact the president's team has had with the Russian government. Is that right?
That's right. And these contacts that have been under investigation now for some time and extend back to during the campaign. What I'm told is that there have been these instances where sources and methods have not been conveyed. It is, again, dredging up these bad feelings that were really prevalent during the transition and right after the inauguration.
In other words, Trump's administration is being kept from fully commencing so that his intelligence community can't find all the bodies from the previous administrations. Hence why draining the swamp is taking so long. The swamp wasn't going to let them just come in there and flush the toilet, were they? Which essentially is a bunch of handlers, spies, and whistleblowers in waiting for then President-elect Trump's transition team. What a joke. No wonder Trump looks pissed. Obama just effed him over. Sucker. Oh, thank you, Mr. Trump. This is going to be a smooth transition.
Psych! I was only kidding!
Look at this. If the White House Transition Coordinating Council, its members, or their designees find it necessary to seek advice from private individuals or outside organizations, such counsel should be sought in a manner that seeks individual advice. In other words, if you need to report or whistleblow something that you heard that alarmed you, that the duties of the presidency are not being discharged properly, leak it to outside third parties. Look at this email, request to hold over. Quote, if you are willing to continue beyond inauguration, submit a new letter to President Obama replacing the effective date of January 20th, 2017 with at the pleasure of the president, as in President Obama. So this is literally what it means to be an Obama holdover. Trump didn't choose to surround himself with the swamp. The swamp was left behind by Obama via executive order. Talk about abuse of power. Wait, what's this little nugget? Presidential transition guide? No, you don't think they would be bold enough to include. What do you know? Emergency preparedness. It is critical that the eligible candidate be prepared to respond to any emergency situation that may occur during the transition period. The GSA Presidential Transition Support Team will provide the following support to assist with emergency preparedness planning: a draft outlining the continuity of operations service during an actual continuity of operations event. Well, since Mr. Kroger was the special assistant to the GSA 2016 Presidential Transition Support Team and is currently part of the administration, he might be the one Durham might want to ask about continuity of government operations during the transition, if they were ever invoked or still in effect. I say this because Pelosi has been sharing some interesting steganography with us since the midterms, specifically her lapel pin, which is the mace of the House of Representatives. What the heck is that?
We are talking with the Honorable Jack Russ, Sergeant-at-Arms of the House.
Well, Bob, the mace is the symbol of the House of Representatives. It is a very powerful symbol which allows the Speaker to maintain order if and when the House became completely unruly. Instruct the Sergeant-at-Arms to present the mace.
She wore it on 3 specific occasions: the 2019 State of the Union, when the House debated and approved the articles of impeachment, and the 2020 State of the Union. This is extremely important symbolism because the mace is a weapon and symbolizes order in the House. It is used by the Sergeant-at-Arms to keep order in the House. It only is displayed if there's an emergency. Why? Because he's actually the chief law enforcement officer of the House of Representatives and responsible for security in the House wing of the Capitol. So it shouldn't be a surprise if he's in charge of emergency management. We can assume that during the transition period after the midterm elections, when the Dems took over the House of Representatives, they must have had a secret meeting prior to being sworn in where Pelosi was deemed acting president in waiting.
Speaker Pelosi had sent him a letter asking him to postpone the State of the Union, telling him he could do it from the Oval Office if he wants.
Nancy Pelosi started the day waiting for President Trump to respond to her State of the Union power play.
But we haven't heard. Very silent, more than 24 hours.
3 hours later, she got her response. The president refusing to let Pelosi use a military jet to travel. In a letter writing, "Dear Madam Speaker, due to the shutdown, I'm sorry to inform you that your trip has been postponed." Lawmakers set to accompany Pelosi were already heading to Joint Base Andrews when the news hit. Their bus turning right around. Democrats furious.
Well, look, none of this has to be related to the shutdown.
Extending once again the emergency. You don't think this is what their secret plane trip really was about, do you? This suggests that the 25th Amendment is in effect, but secretly as part of a national security investigation by the House Intel Committee, or something like that. You know, Roger Stone used to come on InfoWars quite a bit. He talked a lot about how they were planning to use the 25th Amendment to remove Trump.
We were the first media outlet in the country, really, to expose the 25th Amendment plot. Under the 25th Amendment, if a majority of the cabinet plus the vice president agree that the president is incapacitated, well, then he is removed. I reported right here on InfoWars that that was afoot.
They sure silenced him, didn't they? So what is Trump to do? Well, to fix a problem, you must first go back to a strategic entry point and use it as leverage. Not to mention, the Department of Defense plays an important role in the whole-of-government partnership spearheaded by the NSA and Cybercom's election security group, formed after the midterm elections. The NSA poised to support the 2020 election, generating vital insights and sharing them with DHS and FBI. Notice DHS and FBI are not the first in line as far as data collection is concerned. Notice the National Guard is expected to be involved in monitoring the elections. This will become extremely more relevant, but first we need to understand how the National Guard comes into play. The National Guard is an interesting entity. They have a dual function, domestic and foreign. Remember in my report about the California National Guard State Partnership Program? There's not just the United States European Command. We've got Northcom, Southcom, CENTCOM, AFRICOM, and PACCOM. These state partnership programs literally have a dual purpose: foreign and domestic. They are either deployed at home to help with emergency procedures or deployed abroad for the same. Meanwhile, in the background, mechanisms to merge U.S. interests with international interests were formed, that in the event there's a global emergency, pandemic, or natural catastrophe, national sovereignty could be dissolved worldwide, and a global governance could be formed in the name of security and safety. These dual-purpose foreign and domestic operations conducted in destabilized countries create gray areas that breed corruption.
You know, where there's chaos, there's profit.
Our encampments were in the poppy field. The harvesting of the crop happened right in front of us, and they are effectively guarding the poppy fields. I think it's really a disaster.
Here you have one of the best fighting forces in the world ever mounted, and in a sense, you're watching as this opium is being grown. We can't eradicate these crops for security reasons.
The drug people want chaos as well because they can advance their personal desires and needs and economic goals. You know, so I think really what you have is that you know, these two things are bedfellows. You know, they're working together because they have to.
Thus, legitimate command and control programs have been subverted to undermine our national interests.
I went through the Pentagon 10 days after 9/11. And an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office. He pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. I said, 7 countries in 5 years. I said, is that a classified memo? He said, yes, sir. And we've got about 5 or 10 years to clean up those old Soviet client regimes. Syria, Iran, Iraq, before the next great superpower comes on to challenge us.
The Obama administration helped accelerate destabilization across the Middle East, giving rise to the Islamic State terrorist organization, helped overthrow Ukraine, allowing his administration to rape, loot, and plunder U.S. aid resources and business in the aftermath.
You basically say that the money that goes to Ukraine ends up, 30-40% of it ends up just going to corruption.
A lot of government spending does.
The Kremlin claims the U.S. is behind widespread pro-democracy protests.
$5 million in American taxpayer dollars went to Soros's group
the money allegedly spent to help destabilize Macedonia's democratically elected right-of-center government.
As the head of USAID faced cross-examination by a congressional committee,
young Cubans were the target of the U.S. government-funded social media network to try and subvert the government.
Millions of dollars in aid to Syria has been funneled to terrorists.
The State Department and USAID budget we discussed today is a proven investment in our national and economic security.
The Obama administration knowingly gave U.S. taxpayer dollars to an al-Qaeda affiliate in Sudan. According to the USAID official, all this was done in consultation with and on the guidance of the State Department under John Kerry.
Some of the most hardcore corruption in history.
With the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
He expected our military to train and fight alongside al-Qaeda while having a proxy war with Russia and Syria. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. Remember when posts of servicemen holding signs saying they didn't join the military to serve al-Qaeda started to surface?
U.S. Marine spokesman confirms that the main U.S. Marine recruiting website was redirected for a few hours overnight to a site that showed photos of a person in a U.S. Marine uniform holding up signs calling President Obama a traitor, urging Marines to refuse orders. The sign read, quote, "I didn't join the Marine Corps to fight for al-Qaeda in a Syrian civil war."
At a critical point during the Syrian civil war, around the time a chemical attack killed hundreds and was used to justify full-on war with Syria.
The site of an alleged chemical weapons attack in Syria pushes President Obama harder to defend his red line.
Preparations for that strike are ramping up right now.
This, of course, just comes hours after U.S. officials called the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian government last week a moral obscenity. This from Secretary of State John Kerry.
That's right. This morning, Syria saying that is a lie. Let's get right to the region.
Right now, there are 5 destroyers positioned in the eastern Mediterranean, along with the USS San Antonio, an amphibious ship. The Nimitz, should it be called to join them, would bring along a group of 4 additional destroyers and a cruiser.
Director of Defense Intelligence Agency Michael Flynn visited as the first U.S. officer inside the Russian military intelligence headquarters in Moscow. We can assume that he was shown intelligence about the chemical attack that undermined what Obama was telling the public.
I have a classified secret NOFORN. It's from the NGIC, or the National Ground Intelligence Center. The U.S. military did an assessment that the sourcing of sarin originated out of Iraq and into Turkey, going to the opposition, principally al-Qaeda.
What I know is that the complexity of the situation on the ground right now is beyond anybody's wildest imagination. But we have to be much more specific in our relationships. And so there's not a misunderstanding and there's not a miscalculation because of some ill-advised tactic that's used in Damascus or Baghdad that causes something that we don't want.
Public outcries forced President Obama to back off Syria militarily, which some argue resulted in Flynn being retired by the Obama administration. When Flynn emerged and became a part of President-elect Trump's transition team as the national security advisor, the deep state was like,
"Oh, hell no!" We interrupt our program at the request of the White House. This is the emergency broadcast system.
So Trump had to be stopped at any cost, and the coup truly began 19 minutes after inauguration.
The fake whistleblower's attorney, this guy's name is Mark Zaid. Look at your screen, January 30th, 2017, hashtag coup has started. First of many steps, hashtag rebellion, hashtag impeachment will follow ultimately.
Why? Because they had to have the emergency procedures initiated so that the national security bureaucracy could run the government behind the Trump administration's back. Remember that thing that Eisenhower set up? Remember those leaked images of the military holding up signs in protest of serving al-Qaeda? If all the back channels are clogged, monitored by gatekeepers, and kept off limits, how are Trump's people going to get around them? Instead of the back channel, the foreground had to be used. But in what way?
We have an army of digital soldiers. What we are now, what I call them, because this was an insurgency, folks. This was run like an insurgency. This was irregular warfare at its finest in politics. And that story will continue to be told here, but we have what we call citizen journalists.
Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning, because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C. and giving it back to you, the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost.
And so the American people decided to take over the idea of information. They took over the idea of information, and they did it through social media.
This was all thought out in advance, hence the plan. Let's look at this map of the state partnership programs.
The Trump administration is reviving the long-dormant Space Command.
A new era of American leadership in space has begun.
On Thursday, President Donald Trump participated in a ceremony reestablishing the U.S. Space Command after 17 years. The program was eliminated in 2002 after 9/11 shifted parts of the government's focus to combating terrorism.
President Trump will direct the Department of Defense to establish a combatant command that will oversee all our military activities. Space Command will be the 11th combatant command in the U.S. military, joining the Indo-Pacific Command, the European Command, but also it will serve alongside other what are known as functional commands like Strategic Command and Special Operations Command, and it will be led by a 4-star flag officer.
In other words, Space Force isn't part of the state partnership because there isn't a Space Guard yet. Very interesting. Every aspect of the military, special forces, and all have an overlap with the National Guard. All except for Space Force, because there isn't a Space Guard. For now, Space Force can bypass the current situation and serve the president as a checks and balance to keep the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex in check, just as Eisenhower envisioned it. Now you're starting to fully see it. Remember, I'm listener supported, so please go to InfoWarsStore.com to support my work. Take advantage of some of the great deals and the great products we have available so you can both help take care of your own health and help us fight the info war. You can also go to Millie Weaver on Subscribestar to support me directly if you choose to. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to give you my next video.
When it comes to rebuilding your energy, convenience is key. While coffee, candy, and other sugary products can give you a short boost, the crash can leave you more tired than ever. Turbo Force from InfoWars Life is a powerful mix-in energy packet that utilizes vitamins, amino acids, and extracts used for hundreds of years to provide you focus, clarity, and a boost of energy on the go. Simply take a packet, mix it into the indicated amount of water, and enjoy. With 14 servings per box for a 2-week or more supply, this is the formula to stock up on whenever you need a boost. Perfect for work, in the car, or at home. Turbo Force is the ultimate answer to a sluggish day. Don't let your day slow you down. Perk up with Turbo Force at InfoWarsStore.com